In today's video, we're going to be building this morph roll ability so that the player can fit through these narrow tunnels. And as you can see, our morph roll will include animations, it'll pause the animation, it'll have the ability to jump while we're rolling and prevent things like standing up in these tunnels. Hi, my name is Michael. Join me as we build an epic Metroidvania game in Godot 4 using GD script. This is the Metroidvania Forge. All right, as we look at this ability, this morph roll, it's pretty straightforward actually, but there's going to be a few fun things that we're going to do. Like we're going to have a simple animation for the morph ball. And as you can see, it rolls or plays the animation as we move, and otherwise it stops. In addition to that, we're going to make sure that our morph roll kind of works in conjunction with these little passages. I'll show you a little bit how I set these up. We'll be building in some things like we want the ability to not only jump or morph from a jump state, but also be able to jump while morphed. Now we're going to limit the ability. We don't have double jump here, but we will make sure that we can do things like jump down through platforms. And obviously we've added some game juice with audio and visual effects. In addition, I think I mentioned this, we're going to make sure you can't unmorph in one of these holes and, you know, get in a weird stuck position. Even though it would be pretty easy to fix, we're just going to prevent that altogether. We're going to have just some basic animation for this, and we're going to come through and show you how we update the collision shapes. We're going to use code to do that. And we're going to add a couple additional ray casts to help us determine whether or not we can unmorph into the regular form. And on top of that, we'll also add in some logic to help us know if we can morph. We'll also add some code to kind of show you how we can prevent morphing when you've got this interact, because we're using the same button press, right? And so we don't want to be morphing when we're saving our game, things like that. So I'll build in some code for that as well. All right. If you're new and you want to see where these assets come from, you can hop over to the itch.io page, which is linked into the description. But of course, if you want to understand how this player state machine is built, then please hop back to the earlier chapter and episodes in this series. You can just look at the whole playlist, which is in the description as well, and find those. Otherwise, let's get to it. All right, everybody. So one thing to mention as we get started here, I've already gone through and kind of edited my level, and I've added this little section with the narrow passageways that the player cannot get through, right? And so these are small. They're going to be required that the player morphs into that little ball to be able to fit in there, okay? So I've already set that up. If you've been following along, you should have all the assets that you need to do that. Otherwise, just make sure that you've got something that's got this small gap that the player can't walk through. What I've got is I've just got this visual, and I'll show you on the tile map. It's these little pieces right here. There's a version of it for the dirt and one for the stone. And it's just a little bit of a hang so that you can add that visual difference there. And I've just used that here as well, okay, to create these narrow passages. So make sure you've got those set up before you get into this. So you may need to just build a little test section that you can use this ability on. And once you have that, then you're ready to get started. Okay. Once you're at this point with me, then let's go ahead and hop over to our player scene. And I'm going to close some of these other scenes. I've got things open from my last video. And what we're going to do to begin is we're going to add the animation that we're going to need for this morph, the ball rolling kind of a state that we're going to have. So I'm going to come in here to my animation player, and we'll just add a new animation, and it's going to be fairly simple. Now I'm going to add a note that I'm not having a transform into and out of the ball. And I think that would be an awesome, you know, assignment for you guys as a homework assignment. If you want to develop those animations and build them into this state, you can. And I'll give you a quick hint on how you can do that when we get to that point on queuing animations. There might be a few wrinkles that you might need to work out, but for the most part, it should be straightforward. So I'm going to just come in here though, in the meantime, and I'm going to grab my idle animation and I'll duplicate it. And we'll call this one, I'm just going to call it ball. It's just simpler. Now, in order for this animation to play back how I want it to, I've already gone through and done the testing and resized it, of course. So I'm going to set my snapping to 0.05 seconds. Okay, that's like a 20 frame per second frame rate. Make sure that you've got the snapping turned on for the cursor. And then the duration of this animation, you'll see, is quite short. It's going to be something like 0.225, I think. Does that make sense? Maybe it's supposed to be 0.25, but we'll come in here. We might need to adjust that. We're going to start with our first frame here. Let's see, this guy should be frame 44 is the first frame of that ball rolling animation. There we go. And then I'm just going to come in here and just add 2 others. And actually, you know what? I think I don't think 0.05 is the snapping I want. I'm going to do, so yeah, 0.075. How about that? Because this duration that I put in here is going to be 0.225. Okay, that's going to give us 3 even little segments and at the speed that I liked it. There are other ways you can adjust the speed of the animation, of course, but if you're like me, sometimes you spend a lot of time just trying to get it just perfect. We can go ahead and just add these keys the old-fashioned way real quick. There's only a couple of them. So just make sure you've got 44 through 46. And we do want this animation to have the looping turned on, okay? So we should have something that looks like this. And let me go ahead and turn off the visibility on some of these collision shapey shape things. Okay, so there we go. We've got a rolling animation. And essentially, we're going to use this animation for the whole state when you're in the ball. We'll just stop the animation when you're not moving or pause it. And then when you continue moving, we'll resume playback of the animation. And since it's looping, it'll just keep looping. And direction flipping is already built into our player. So the sprite will flip depending on the direction we're facing. All right. So there we go. That's all we need for that animation. Once you've got that set up, we'll move on to the next step. Okay, there's going to be a lot that we're going to have to do with this, so we're probably going to hop back and forth between the script and our player scene here, because we're going to have to come in here and make some adjustments, like adding some raycasts that we can use to help us detect when we're inside that little passageway and some other things. But let's go ahead and get our new state created. So I'm just going to add a child node here, and a regular old node will do. And I'm going to go the lazy route and call it ball, but it is going to be the morph roll state, right? So I'm going to go ahead and turn on access by unique name for that. And of course, we want to come down to our player states folder, and we're going to make a new script in here. Okay. Well, I'll just keep it consistent. I'm going to call it ball. Okay. Now let's do kind of my usual. I'm going to come into the idle state because it's one of the simplest, cleanest states. Copy everything, paste it. Make sure we rename this player state to player state ball. Could be morph roll. I think I just got lazy when I was setting this up, and I thought I don't want to have to type morph roll so many times. So there we go. We've got this state set up. Let's go ahead. Well, let's clear out each of these functions as well. We don't really need to. We'll come add some stuff into them, but I want to start it with a clean slate on this one. So just clear those out. And now we can come in and assign this script to our state. Almost done here. Let's go into our player state. So just control clicking that name to get here. Like we've been doing, we're just going to add a reference to this state here within this root node class that we're using. So now all of our other states have access to the ball state if they need it. Okay, go ahead and save that. Now I'm going to restart my project so that my state machine icon shows up. So I'll be right back after we go project. There it is, reload current project. Okay, we're back in here. Let's just check this out. Our ball state now has the icon and the script attached. So we're looking good. All right, looking at our player state ball script, we're going to need a few variables that we can use in here, and we're going to need to have reference to some sound effects and some things like that. So let's start with the sound effects. So we've got an effect for both the morph in and out sound. So if we go to the general audio that you should have already brought in at this point in the chapter, but if you haven't, you can hop over to the itch.io page linked in the description, grab that zip file. But we've got morph and morph out. I'm going to bring these in and just make sure that I update the name so that it's obvious that they're audio. Okay, so we need those. There's a couple other things that I'm going to put in here. Now, one thing that's interesting, and I'm going to go the more rudimentary, simple route for this, but while we are in the morph ball state, I do want the player to be able to jump. And so I'm going to give it a specific jump velocity. We're not going to support double jump or anything from this state, but you could theoretically jump and then morph into the ball in the air. So, you know, you kind of get a double jump there. But let's go ahead and just do this. I'm going to export just a variable for that jump velocity. So this will be a float, and I'm just going to set it equal to 400. I do want another local variable that I'm going to use just to help simplify how I determine if I'm on the floor or not. Well, if I've switched from on floor to not on floor, you'll see this, because obviously the player's got the on floor function that we can call, right? Since he's a character body. But I do want to know, I want the state to remember what it thinks it is so that if that changes, I can react. So I'm just going to say true. And lastly, well, we don't have these yet, but we're going to need reference to some ray casts. And we'll do that at the point that we start implementing those, okay? Because really what I like to do, kind of like we did with the ground slam, let's do the basic implementation first. Now this basic implementation is going to have some bugs and defects with it, so we'll work on those after we do the basic. Okay, let's start implementing this simple state. Well, it's not super simple, but there's some simple stuff we can do, right? So I think the first thing we want to do is we obviously want our player to play that new animation we just created. So we'll just grab our player's animation player and play the ball animation. Okay. Now, one thing that we're going to have to do is deal with our player's collision. So we've got a couple collision shapes, and I'm going to take a route that maybe we should have taken with the crouch to begin with. And I'm just going to modify the collision shape on this collision stand. And so actually, if you like how we do this here for the ball by just reusing the collision stand and changing its size and shape, then you could, moving forward, you could implement that same kind of logic, and then we could get rid of the collision crouch. Okay, so we're going to need to modify this, but we also are going to need to modify this damage area collision shape. Because the shapes are linked, our collision for our stand and our damage area for our stand, we technically only have to alter the shape on one of them, but we're also, because we changed the shape, we're going to have to change the position. So we'll have to change the position of both, and I'll show you what I mean. If we take our collision stand here and we were to like change the rate, well, that was a bad example. Let me shrink the height to like 20, and you can see it's not on the floor anymore. So once we change this height value, we do have to come into our transform for this and move it down. Okay, so we're going to have to do that position change on both our collision stand and our damage area stand, but then we'll only have to change the shape of the collision area. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with that. And I may have missed a couple things in there that we'll end up doing here, but first I'm going to get a reference to that shape. I'm just going to call it shape, and this is a capsule shape 2D. Now, if you're using a different kind of shape than me, then that code is going to be slightly different, right? This is using a capsule shape 2D. You can see that little hover over. But if you did like a circle shape or rectangle shape, then that is going to be whichever type you chose, right? So you're going to want to adjust this typing appropriately if that's different. So I'm going to go ahead and just say this is equal to, and I'm going to grab my player. And in the player, I should have reference to my collision. There it is, underscore stand. And I'm just going to use this. And because this is a collision shape, there is a get shape function. I'm just going to do this and make sure that I cast it as a capsule shape 2D. Okay. So this should get reference to that shape. And now that we have that stored in that shape variable, we can come in here and write code to manipulate it. So we're going to just set the shape's height and radius. So I'm going to say shape.radius equals, and then let's look at it and see what we want. So if we go to our animation player and go to the ball animation, so we can see the size of this ball. Now, your mileage is going to vary on this. I kind of went back and forth on how to size this, but essentially what I think I want is the default radius and height, 8 and 46. We want a radius that fits the size of the ball a little bit, and that's going to be somewhere around 10, maybe 11. And we want this to feel like a ball. So I need to set the height to double that radius. We can't, height is like diameter, right? It's a diameter style measurement, at least when it's a circle, it is. Obviously, this isn't always a circle, so that's my statement previously wasn't quite true. But if we have a radius of 11 and we want this to be a circle shape, then we need the height to be 22. And then you can see that this, when I do that and move it down, it's going to give us a pretty accurate shape to sprite representation with just a little bit of forgiveness there. Okay. And you can see that we're going to have to move our position down to -11 on the Y Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and undo that, but just remember that our radius is 11, height 22, and our Y position is negative 11. Okay, so let's just undo till I get it back. 8, 46, that should have been the defaults. I'm going to go back to my script. So the radius, what was that, 11? You don't need the 0.0, but I'm going to be fancy. And then let's set the height to 22, like so. Okay, so that's going to resize both this collision shape, but since it's a shared capsule shape, it's going to update the collision shape on our damage area. Now, because we've done this, let's go ahead and adjust that Y position of each of those shapes. We're just going to grab each of these. So player dot, let's see, collision stand dot position dot Y. Okay, this is going to equal negative 11. We'll do basically just copy this and paste it, but instead of adjusting the collision stand, this is the DA stand. That's what I called the damage area stand collision shape, right? You can find that down here, DA stand. Okay, so we're just going to adjust the position of both of those so that it lines up with how we were kind of mocking there as we played around in the player scene. Okay, that's going to be enough to get us in the proper animation and to also adjust our collision, right? So that it works better with this ball shape. So now theoretically, when we come down here in our playground, we'll be a much smaller shape and we should fit underneath these, okay? So I'm going to come in here, and before we can test this, we need to kind of hook it up. So let's open the idle script again. Okay, now in the idle script, let's go to our handle input. We've got dash, attack, jump. Now we're going to utilize a new input. And so if event.is action pressed, and we're going to be looking for this action. I've used this before. I should have given it a different name. Okay, so if we use the action, if we press action, then we want to return the ball state. Okay, so we'll just hook this up in the idle state here and see if we can transition. Then we'll know that our code is somewhat working. Boink. Nice. You can see I can change direction because that directionality code is just built into the player, right? But I can't do anything else, and I can't get out. But so far, so good. We can get into that morphed ball state. Okay, that works. Let's go ahead and hook up this line of code everywhere else where we should be able to morph. And so I'm going to go through. We did it to idle. Let's open the run script. While we're running, we should definitely be able to use this. So I'm going to put it in that same order, right? So in idle, it's the last after jump. Just try and keep that going. Okay, so in run state, we can morph while we're jumping. I think that would be appropriate. This is going to be a lot like some of our other states where we can kind of transition into this one from just about any other state. Okay, jump, fall. Oops, let's go back to jump. I've got a little naming convention error. We've encountered that before, haven't we? Okay, over here in the fall state, same thing. The jump press is just a lot bigger over here, but we'll keep that same simple logic. I think while we are dashing, I want to be able to do it. So let's see. Oh, crouch. Let's do crouch. I'm here on crouch. Let's just do that one. I should just go down the list. So crouch, attacking. I think we can do it during attack. That's fine. Just like we've done. I think we did this with the dash as well. Yeah. So dash will essentially cancel an attack, and so with this. Okay. Let's see. Take damage. No. Death. No. Dash. Yeah, we'll do it. Well, let's do it from dash. You can obviously change this if you want to. Now that's interesting. This is the first one we've hooked up here in dash. And actually, part of me wants to revisit things like jump and attack and maybe bring them in here. But for now, this is good. Okay, dash, ground slam. I'm going to say no. I think ground slam is pretty much a locked down kind of a state. Okay. In fact, I think being able to transition to a ball from the dash might give us some potential fun movement where you can dash and then transition to a ball right away, and then you'll maybe be flying through the air. We'll try that out. We'll see if that works. Okay, there we go. We've hooked those up. So now if we test, we should be able to, transition to a ball from run. Dang it. We need to be able to get out of a ball state for this to work good. I'm going to jump. Okay. Those look like they're, oh, you saw, I rolled under the thing. Let's do that again, actually. This is a good test. So we're running. Can't fit. Now the ball can fit. That shows that our collision shape is working, right? Okay. I think that's pretty good. We're going to have to come revisit these. maybe I should have done this, but remember how we use this can dash for our dash? We're going to need similar logic for this, okay, for the ball state. And actually, we probably just could right now go into all of these and just check if the player has the ball, right? Or what is it called? Morph roll. See, now I've messed up my naming. So we could do this. The reason I don't want to do this is because this action pressed is, we're using this also for interacting. Okay, so like for our save, stuff like that. So you're going to see, we're going to run into some issues there that we're going to have to iron out. So for that purpose, we're going to build a little function like this. It'll be called can roll or whatever. Okay, can morph something so that we can add some extra logic into that check. But for now, we're not going to care about those. But let's go back to our ball state and maybe let's make it so that we can leave the ball state real quick. And here's what we're going to do. Let's go down to exit, or not to exit, to handle input. And we're going to just check our event. So if event is action pressed, action. Okay. If we press this, right now, let's just go ahead and return idle. Okay. In fact, let's do this. Let's do one thing. Let's say if player dot is on floor. There we go. Then we'll return idle. Otherwise, oops, I'm having a hard time. Otherwise, we'll return the fall state. Okay, that's good. We're going to do some extra logic here, but we'll get to that in a moment. So let's just test this. We should be able to now enter and exit the morph roll state. Okay, good. Very good. So now we can go through. See if we can get up there. Oh, nice. Obviously, I don't have control over the ball right now. So it's just inheriting whatever velocity it had when it entered the state, but we'll fix that. Okay, but that means it's working. I mean, we can now get in and out of the ball state. So that's good. Good progress. Okay, we're going to have some other stuff to do here, but I want to first kind of finish a little bit more of this core functionality. So let's look at the process function. Actually, let's do physics process first so that we can move. So right now, when we're in the ball form, we're just always rolling and we can't move. We can't control our movement, right? So what we want to do is we want to handle both of those. We'll handle the movement in physics and we'll handle the rolling animation in process. But so in our physics process, we're going to just do our player velocity. So we'll say player.velocity.x. And then this can just equal our player dot direction dot x, and then we also have a player move speed, right? So we can just multiply it by that just to get the speed. Okay, so now we can set the velocity, and this should make it so that we can move now. Yeah, and we can stop moving. Okay, that's good. We can't do that. We can't do anything else, and the rolling animation is still going. So for the rolling animation, let's look at our process. And we'll do a check. We'll say if player.direction.x is equal to 0, then in this case, right, we're not pressing a direction, then we should stop playing the roll animation. Now, you might want to do this based off of player's velocity. That would be an alternative way. And if you're going to do variable speed, velocity, and animations, then that would be the way. But for our simple implementation, this will work just great. So I'm going to grab our player's animation player. And there's a speed scale function. I don't think that we've used this. Have we used this in this series? I don't recall. Maybe. If we're not moving, then we're going to set our speed scale to 0. Otherwise, we are moving, right? Then we're going to I'll just copy this line, this whole line of code here, and we'll set it back to 1. Okay. Now, because we've done this, I'm going to copy this line. Well, let's maybe demo this. There might be a bug I can demo here. So now if I stop moving, the ball just stops rolling, which is good. Now if I leave, okay, you can see there's an issue. If I leave while I'm rolling, then animation works. But if I stop, I've set my speed scale to 0, and I'm not pushing anything. I'm going to just leave the state. Now my speed scale is still 0, so those animations are, they're not playing because the speed scale is 0. It basically just means it's paused. So we just need to take this speed scale and go to our exit function and set it to 1. Every time we exit, reset it, right? So now if we're rolling and we stop and leave, our animations work again, okay? Cool. Okay, we've got some basic movement, basic animation. Now it's time to maybe go back through this and look at some of the other bits of functionality we need to solve for, or bugs and issues that we're going to run into. Okay, let's actually look at one of these issues. And some of you are probably thinking of this already. If we are underneath this section, and let's say we unmorph. Oh, interesting. Oh, actually, let's look at something else that we didn't do. Obviously, here we've got now our player is messed up. You guys probably see what's going on there. I just skipped a step. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's do visible collision shapes and turn this back on so we can see what's happening. So you can see when I unmorph, we never reset our collision shape. So now our collision shape is always a ball unless we're crouched. Okay. Let's come in here and I'm just going to go into my, into this script, I guess. Let's see. Exit. Am I on ball? I am. I'm just getting confused because I got so many things open. Okay. So in the ball state, when we exit, we did reset our speed scale. We need to reset this stuff. Okay. So I'm going to take this, copy all that code. But of course, the values are going to be different. And I happen to have this shape up and you can see the default radius and height values are right there. So 8 is the radius I was using. What did I press? 8 and then 46 for the height. And of course that Y value is different as well. And you can see it's -23 is what I've got there, it looks like. Okay, so we'll just set each of these to -23. Okay. So now that should fix that little issue. But now we've got a new one. So now if I unmorph in here, I'm stuck. And in fact, one thing I do want to do is I eventually I will come into these little overhang bits and add a little bit of collision. And so maybe let's do that real quick, because there is a bug here that there's going to be several bugs with this. If I run and I crouch, then it's maybe possible to get stuck in here. Okay. Yeah. Now, multiple ways to handle this. One is to have some codes so that if you get stuck underneath, he kind of, when you stand, he kind of slides back out. I don't really want to do that. I'd rather just not let him slide under there. And the way I can do that is, obviously this crouch shape is taller than the roll shape. So if I build some collision into that tile map, that should fix it. So I'm going to come down here to my levels, forest. No, where do I keep them? Tile sets. Let's just open up this Forgotten Forest tile set real quick. Now we're going to come in, make sure you're on the tile set editing part of this, and then just find these little guys. They're right over here. We want to add a little bit of collision to these. So let's go to our paint, select the physics layer 0. This is our regular physics layer. Now, obviously we don't want these completely blocked off, right? We really need them to be up here somewhere. Okay. And I'm giving it just a couple pixels. So for these, maybe that's fine. But I think on these side bits, I do want to maybe add a point and give it a little bit of a rounded corner. I'm going to flip that horizontally by pressing H, give it the other side. Okay. So now that we've added these, and I'm not going to worry too much about these corners on this one not being quite right. It's good enough for now. You can always come back in. But now that we've got this in place, oh shoot, you know what? We definitely got to bring the grass ones in, because otherwise you could stand on top of them. You see they're over a few pixels, aren't they? Like 1, 2, 3 of these grids. So is that 6 pixels? So let's zoom out. Let me just come over here. We'll fix that real quick. 1, 2, 3. Boop. Oh man. Oh man. There we go. Okay, so now, okay, that's better. Now this will fit. Okay, now that we've done that though, that's going to adjust our playground. Let's just go ahead and run this and see. I don't think we'll be able to slide underneath it anymore. Yeah, we definitely can't. Okay. It's still too small to slide under. So that's a good, easy way, in my opinion, to fix that. unless for some reason you wanted that Mario Brothers style, be able to slide under a little gap when you're running fast. I'm not going for that. That's what the morph roll's for. Okay, so let's just test. Let's just make sure that our morph roll still fits under there. Oh, it doesn't. So maybe we need to move that up a pixel or decrease the size of our morph ball by a pixel or two. And I think, I don't know, you pick your poison. I'm going to just come in here and just modify these. I think they were only off by maybe a pixel. Oops. So maybe I'll start with these ones that I've already got selected here. Okay, yeah, that's looking pretty good. Let's just try this. I probably should be doing this with these ones down here first because they're the ones that we're going to be using. So I'm just going to drag them all up one little grid line. So I drop this guy. Oh, I don't think I painted some of these after I changed them. I'm being sloppy, guys. Okay, there we go. That's looking better. Let's give that a whirl and see if that lets us fit through. Okay, it does. And can we slide under it? No, we cannot. And because we gave it that little rounded corner, it does help it make sure it pops them out on its own. Okay, we've solved a couple issues there, but there's one more. Let's demonstrate this next one. Well, we kind of already did, but I can get stuck underneath. We need to prevent the player from being able to do that. Obviously, you can just morph again and get out, but I mean, that's just gross. Let's just prevent that from even happening, right? Okay, so what are we going to do with our player to fix that? Now, there are various ways that you could do this. I think you could add another collision area, maybe that detects collision with the walls and just see. But really what we want to do is we want to know, can the player stand? Meaning, is there enough space above and below him for him to transform into normal size collision, okay? And in order to do that in a fairly accurate manner, I'm going to use some ray casts. And this isn't a maybe 100% perfect solution, but I think this should avoid issues, certainly any annoying game-breaking issues, okay? So I'm going to come in here and just look at this. We've got some shape casts that we're using, and we could use shape cast for this. I'm going to opt for a simple ray cast in this example here. Why don't we do this? I'm going to go ahead and just create a regular node 2D, and we'll give it a name, something like ball rays. It sounds worse than it should. I'm going to add a ray cast 2D. Okay. And I'm going to give these some names. We'll call it ball ray up. And I'm going to duplicate this one and call it down. Okay. So we want to check up and down because, you know, maybe you're jumping in the ball form and you're the top of the character is against the ceiling, but there's plenty of space for him to morph. So we want to let it happen. Okay. So we're going to check both up and down. And let's make each of these accessible by unique name. Boink. Now, what are we going to do? I'm going to disable both of these, actually. Let's select both. Yeah, okay. I do have both selected. We probably can turn on exclude parent. We don't really need that, though. Target position, we're going to change that on both of them. And then collision mask, let's go ahead and do this. So that should hit ground. And I'm going to turn on hit from inside just in case. Collide with, it only needs to collide with bodies. Okay. So we've got those basic settings configured. But when we look at these, let's start with the down. Or actually, let's start with up. Down's going to be, this will be more obvious. Okay. So we're going to change the target position on this. And here's what we'll do. We're only going to move it up a little bit. So I'm going to move it up to -1 on the Y. And then we'll have it cast to basically the height of our character. Okay. So if we look at this collision stand, you can see our height is 46 pixels. Okay. And so what I'm doing with this up ray is I'm casting that same amount, but I've also bumped it up 1 pixel, partly because I don't want it to collide with the floor. So, you know, maybe we could even do this. We could move it up even more, like -4. And then we could make this smaller. This now needs to be negative, like 43, I guess. Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense, right? You can see it's just barely pointing above his head. That gives us just a tiny bit of leeway. Okay. Now, likewise, for this ball down, we're going to do something similar, but it doesn't need to be casting very far, the downward one. In addition, I think we should just make sure that our downward one is also looking at one-way platform because we might be standing on a one-way platform with a short thing overhead. I don't know that I would ever intentionally build that, but you know, now you could maybe, and it should work. For this downward one, let's go ahead and we really only need to be casting a tiny bit. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and bump it up a pixel or so. Okay, so let's see. Position on the Y. Let's just give it -1. Okay, so we're being a little bit extra cautious here. We don't need to be checking as far as we are with either of these, but at the same time, this isn't too far. This is only slightly taller than our player. These are set up and configured, I think, as much as we need to. Just make sure they're disabled and everything like that. Okay. Now, next we'll come into our script, and let's go ahead and grab. I made a comment for this, a reference to these two raycasts. Okay, I'm going to grab them in here. Now that we've got these, we can do a check. And I made them disabled because we don't need these to be casting and checking for collision all the time. Really, we only need to do it when we try and morph out of that ball form, right? Now I'm going to come to the bottom of my state, and let's build a little function that we can use. I'll just call it can stand. Okay. And this doesn't need any arguments, and it will return a Boolean. So I think by default we'll return true. Okay. Now we can come in here. We'll fill in the guts of this, but let's go ahead and look at our handle input. So here, where we've pressed action, now instead of just checking if we're on the floor or not, first we're going to do a check. We'll say if, and then it's can stand. Okay, of course, because we're going to be doing this check first, we need to indent this logic here so that it falls underneath the can stand result. Okay, so by default, that's going to return true. Let's go ahead and finish coding this. We basically just need to check both of those raycasts, right? And if what we'll do is if both of them are colliding, we know that we cannot stand, right? Because if both of them are colliding, then it's too small for that collision shape is what we'll say. But if only one or neither of them is colliding, then we can return true. So we'll do a check here. Let's grab our raycast. So we'll just say, for each of these, we'll just say force raycast update. Just like that. Okay, so now they'll both check to see if they're colliding. And of course, we're calling this when we press an action, right? Okay. So every time we press that action button, we'll check, are these colliding? And then we'll just do an if. So we'll say if ball raycast down dot is colliding, and they have to both be colliding, ball ray up dot is colliding, then we'll return false. Okay. Now, if we've built that properly, we should be able to morph and go under here. And now you can see it will not let me morph out. And you can see that those arrows have turned white. That means they're colliding, but they're disabled. And then if I come out here, you can see that they're gray when it's colliding or not colliding, but disabled. Okay. So there we go. We've solved yet one more little problem. And this feature's turning out pretty good. Now I would like to next be able to jump while I'm morphed, I guess. This is okay, it works, but it's a little bit tricky, and I think it would be nice to just be able to do a basic, at least one basic jump while you're in the ball form. Okay, so let's build that next. Okay, let's go ahead. I'm gonna come into my project or my debug settings and turn off collision shapes because they're ugly, but they were useful. Okay. So how are we going to make it so we can jump in the morph state? I'm going to go ahead and we're going to just do, like I'd mentioned previously, we're going to build this into this state. We're just going to give our player some velocity if he presses jump while he's in the rolling state. Okay, so here we've got if action is pressed. Let's do another one. We can do an if, or it can be an elif, but I'm going to just do if event is action pressed. And then here we're looking for jump. Okay, now if we jump, what are we going to do? We already built an export variable for that jump velocity that we can use. So we can handle that. Let's go ahead and just assume that that's all we want to do. Then we can just say player.velocity.y. And then here we could say minus equals jump velocity. Let's just start here. This is flawed, by the way, but let's try it out. Okay, so now I can hit jump. And the rolling still works or not. Let's go ahead and test it over here. Oof, I can't quite jump high enough. I might still need to be nimble about that one, but I could just jump into this little hole just like that. Okay. Now, of course, I didn't put any checks, so we can just jump forever. Okay, we don't want that. So let's go ahead and fix that. That's pretty simple, right? We just need to do a check. Are we on the floor? Okay, if we're on the floor, then we can jump. This will be a little bit better now. Okay, so now I can't spam it. I can only jump when we're on something. Okay. And now there's one other thing I want to do, though. Let's assume we're up here. Maybe we need to be able to jump down through platforms. Like, we can press down and jump down when we're not in the ball form. Let's go ahead and build that in to the ball form, okay? This will be pretty straightforward as well. So what we can do is just within this check, okay, we've pressed jump, we're on the floor. We'll do one more check, and we'll just say if input dot, what is it, is action pressed, not just pressed, is, oh my gosh, is action pressed. There we go. And then down, we've got a down action. So we can just use that, okay? So if this down is pressed and we're on the floor, then we also need to check if we're on a one-way platform. So we'll say player dot, let's see, one-way platform shape cast, right? We've used this before, dot force shape cast update. Okay. And then we'll just do a check. We'll just say if player dot, it might be nice to get this as a variable so it's shorter, but if this dot is colliding. Okay. If this is colliding, this is the same stuff we did in our crouch state, basically. Okay. Then instead of doing this code here, what we'll do is we'll just push our player's position down plus equals 4, something like that. Okay, so he'll bump down 4 pixels, and then we'll return null. Oops, I didn't go to the next line first. Okay, there we go. So now we've got a little branch to potentially, obviously, if these conditions don't pass, then it'll still reach the regular jump. So we should be able to do all of the above. Okay, I can jump, and let's get up there, and then let's morph, and I can jump down. Okay. Cool, looking good. So I would say that our morph role is fully functional for the most part. Okay, there might be other little features that you want to add, but for me, I think this is pretty much fully functional. Now there's a little bit of game juice missing, and some other things that we could add. So I think for the remainder of the video, we're going to primarily focus on that, unless we find any other small things that we want to fix along the way. Okay, a simple win we can get out of this is utilizing the audio. Okay, so let's come down here. In our enter, we should play an audio effect. So we'll say audio.play spatial sound. And then we're going to play, what is it called? Morph audio. And we'll just do it at the player's global position. Okay. And we'll just copy this real quick and come down to our exit function. And we've got the morph out audio as well. We can play that. Okay, so let's just test this out. All right. Sound effects are nice. Okay, that makes it feel a little bit better. I think in addition to this, I'd like to, this is kind of a lame, and I know one way to fix this might be to introduce an animation of the player morphing. That's instant. But without doing that, we can still give this transformation a little bit of extra juice. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cause the player to pop up a little bit. So we'll add a little bit of a Y velocity so that it's kind of like, whoop, he just popped into a ball shape. This will be pretty straightforward. We're just going to come up here. I'm going to separate this bit of code. So I'm going to grab our player.velocity, just grab the Y component, I guess, and minus 100 from it. Okay. You could set it to negative 100. Let's go ahead and transform and see what this looks like, though. Bloop, bloop. But this is kind of fun because now, even if you're jumping, it should, it's actually hard to see if you're jumping, but it should give a little bit of a bounce or extra velocity to that. So you can see if I jump and morph at the same time, it maybe gives me a little bit of extra vertical velocity. It's kind of fun. Okay, so there we go. I think that's a good little bit. We also need some jump and land dust happening, and maybe even the sound effects. So let's add those as well. Now I think there's a couple different ways we could do this, but let's start by looking at the handle input. So when we jump, if we make it here, then this is where we could maybe play the jump audio. And actually, for the jump and land, we do have these audio streams. So maybe let's grab a reference to those. Let's grab both the jump and the land audio. Okay. So let's see, where was I? Handle input. We're jumping. So now we can say jump audio dot play, maybe. Okay, that should be enough to get that going. Yeah, it still plays sound effect. Let's get the land. And obviously you might want a different sound effect for these, but in order to do the land audio though, and the dust effects, it's going to be a little bit different because we can't just detect when the player is on the floor. We need to know when the player enters the floor. And to the best of my knowledge, there's no signal like when the player enters the floor. Okay. So we're going to come back to our physics process. In the physics process is the best place for us to do that kind of detection when it hits the floor or leaves the floor, because this is the process that also is handling the collisions, right? The physics. So here's what we're going to do. We've added a variable here on floor. By default, it's true. Okay. So what we need to do is, let's see, in our physics process, we're going to use that to tell us which type of check to do. So we're going to say if on floor. Okay. Then what we'll check is we're going to check for the player to not be on the floor. So we'll just do another check. If not, player is on floor. Then what we can do is we can set on floor to false. And we can also, one floor, we can also make a dust effect, right? So in this case, it means he was on the floor. Previously, this was true, but now it's going to be false. So that means he's left the floor, meaning he probably jumped. This will probably also apply when you walk off a ledge, but so maybe that's not the best place to do too much here, but let's go ahead and just add this visual effects here. Visual effects dot jump dust. We could also do the jump dust actually. Here, let me do this real quick. Player global position is where we want to do it. Maybe I want to grab this, and really all we need to do this is just set that to false. Okay, and then let's go up here because we probably only want the jump dust here when we've pressed the button and actually jumped. Okay, but the converse of this, or the opposite condition, where so this is checking if we're on the floor, but now if we weren't on the floor, so we'll say else, this is meaning if on floor was false, then we can do the opposite check, and we'll just say if player dot is on floor, that means we've transitioned to a state where we've been in the air, now we're on the floor. Then we can set on floor equal to true. And here we can do our landing sound effects. So we can, and visual effects. So both of them. We could say visual effects. And then what is it? Land dust at our global position. Okay. And we could also play that land audio. So we've got land audio dot play. Okay, let's give this a whirl. Now we should have a little bit extra game juice. Nice. You saw it even when we transformed, right? Much better. I mean, to me, that adds a whole lot to it. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. I think at this point, there's maybe one other little thing I would like to do, and we've got this little velocity when we enter. I think I want that same when we exit. So I'm just going to come down here, paste that, and let's just test that out. Yeah, I like that. You can kind of float with that, actually, so maybe that's bad, but you know what? I don't care. People can exploit that. Use it to traverse parts of a level that they couldn't. I mean, it doesn't really, it's not better than the dash. But let's just play around with this and just kind of see. Yeah. I was wondering if the dash would transition into the ball having a lot of velocity, but not really, because we're instantly setting the velocity based on our direction once we enter the dash state. So that's not too abusable. All right, now the last thing that we really need to hook up, as far as I can tell, is this value in here. So we've got our morph roll set to false. However, we are currently able to enter the morph roll. Okay, and I mentioned that we're also going to have some other situations where we might need to limit this. And so we're going to come down here. We've got a can dash function. I'm going to copy this and paste it. And I'm going to call this can morph. Okay. And we're going to change this. So if morph role equals false, then obviously we could return false. Now, the other one I wanted to do is interact, and I'll show you that in a moment, but let's just go ahead and set this up. Obviously, this is almost pointless because we could just return morph role's value or just check it directly from our states. But what I want to do is I want to go back through and, well, let's see. Let's find Shift Control F. Let's find return ball. Find this in every document. Okay, so here we just need to add this. So if action is pressed action and player dot can morph. Okay, let's just add this. And I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to just go down the list. And some of you are probably thinking, you can do find replace. You're totally right. This is a pretty generic. I use action in at least one or two other places that don't want this change. So, okay, return ball. Boom. Let's just make sure we get them all. Oh, I just collapsed that. What did I do? Okay, so there we go. We've updated that. So now because player can morph is false, I shouldn't be able to. Yep, I can no longer do the morph role. Okay, so that's working. Now let's go ahead though and go to our player script. And I'm going to come up just to our variables up here. And I'm going to re-enable this now using the morph role value. Okay, so now I should be able to morph. Awesome. Now I'm going to load my game. Oh, this is the only place I've got it. Let's do this. Let's come to our playground. Do I dare? Yeah, let's do this. I'm going to go ahead and just do a Shift Control A. I want to add a save point. Okay. Oops. It's up here. Let's go ahead and add this save point like right here, just right next to the player or something like that. Okay. So watch what happens because remember, we're using this interact button. For me on my keyboard right now, it's S to save the game. How annoying is that? You know, like you're coming in here. Okay, we don't want both things to happen, right? So we can fix that as well with this can morph function. Okay. Now we don't actually have a easy way to detect this from within the player script currently. What we want to do is we have a system in place, right? That shows the hint above the player and handles things like that. And we kind of connect. Let's look at our unhandled input. Like, okay, we emit a signal here to try and interact, but that doesn't tell us if we can interact, right? But let's just refresh ourselves. If we look at this save point and look at the script on it, you'll notice that in here, when we received this message, the input hint changed, or we emit it, I guess, actually, when we enter it. Yeah, that's what we do. So we can see that we emit this input hint change from our messages system, and we emit it with this interact. So anytime we can interact with an object, we're emitting that. So we can come into our player and we can hook up to that and use that to track whether or not the player is, you know, within a space where he could interact, whether that be a save point or something else that you add in the future, like a door or a treasure chest or anything like that, right? So I'm going to come up here. Let's go to, we're on the player script. Let's go to the ready function. And you can see we've got a few messages we've connected to. Let's just connect to another one. We're going to say messages dot is input hint changed dot connect. And we'll make a new function to handle this, okay? So on input hint changed. Okay, and I'm going to copy that. We know it doesn't exist. We'll just come down here, somewhere down here, and we'll make this. Now, this input hint change signal does contain a prompt or hint name, right? So I'm just going to call it prompt name maybe, which is a string. Now in here, we can just check and we'll say if prompt name equals interact, then we know that the player can interact. And we probably need to set a value for this too, actually. Let's come up here. We'll make a new variable. We've got, here we go. Can interact. And by default, that'll be false. Okay, now we'll go back down. Let's see, where was that? On input. Okay, so if the prompt name is interact, then we can set can interact equals to true. Else, this will be false. Okay, so now we're tracking whether or not we can interact with something. So we'll come down here. Okay, so in this check, if we can morph, we can add an or here. So if morph role is false or can interact is true, like that. If either of those conditions happen to check, then we'll return false. So now if we run this, we can morph, but over here, it's not going to let us morph when we're interacting. It does unmorph, but I'm going to be honest. I think that's okay. I think if you're, we could come in and we could update the logic on our role, on our ball state to include this same, let's see, where is it? To include the same logic, okay? But I don't really want to, because in the case where you want to interact with a treasure chest or a save spot, I think it's best to have the player go back to his normal state for that, okay? All right, so there we have it. In the next video, we're going to be tackling not a new ability, but the method through which the player can acquire abilities. And there are a lot of ways you can do this, and so you don't have to follow what I do exactly, but I'm going to be building an item that the player can attack and destroy it, and then once he destroys it, he'll acquire the ability. You could put it in a treasure chest, you could just make it something the player walks over, or you could make it event driven, right? So where you have some cutscene and then the event just gives the player the ability without him having to pick anything up. But no matter how you do it, the basic logic or the basic implementation that we'll do should be useful to those of you who are following along. So if you want to take homework to figure out how to do that, then by all means, go ahead and do so. Another piece of homework that you could do was to look at how you could add an intro and an exit animation to the morph role. And one thing that I told you I do is I give you a hint. So looking at our enter state here, with the animation player, you can queue up animation. So you could say animation player dot queue, and you could give it an animation name, right? And then what will happen is once this is finished, it will play the following animation automatically. We can just look at this, queues an animation for playback once the current animation and all previously queued animations are done, okay? Now, this might not be a perfect solution for it, but I think it'll work for the most part. You have to be aware, like right now, this probably won't work because my ball is a looping animation, so it's never gonna be done playing. So that cue doesn't work for those. It has to be an animation that doesn't have any looping set, okay? But there's a little tip if you want to figure out how to tackle adding more animations to this. You could do one for the enter and for the exit and just have a lot of fun. Now, I hope you guys have learned something new again from this one. We're done with all of the core player abilities that I intended to build for this series, but if there's any ability that you guys are just really wanting to see or have questions about, go ahead and drop them in the comments and maybe help each other out. Hop in the Discord. You can join my Discord channel and share ideas in there as well. And who knows, maybe I'll decide to come back someday and add new abilities based on your requests to this video. But otherwise, look forward to the next one. Give this video a like, subscribe if you're new, and as always, we'll see you next time.